Years ago, at the age of 25, I ran my first marathon in nearly 5 hours, 4 hours and 59 minutes to be exact. 13 years later, after a lot of life in between, I ran another marathon. That was my 5th one, and I finally qualified for Boston. So in this video, I want to talk to you guys about what I did on all of those years to change my training to cut nearly an hour and a half off of my marathon time, and how you can use these principles too to improve on your marathon time. So 2 weeks ago, I ran my most recent marathon in a time of 3:33:52. And if you happened to check out the video where I recap that race, you may be thinking, that I've always been nearly capable of a time like that, or at least something similar, when that's actually not the case at all. So I will link that video up here in case you want to check it out. I just thought about how I could cover for you guys just my journey to there and my journey to qualifying for Boston, because it wasn't just a situation where I'm just qualifying for Boston overnight, or that I was always that fast or anything like that. It certainly was a journey, and running is a long game for sure. And so there's a lot of principles that I learned along the way that allowed me to reach what I think is pretty close to my potential at this point, although there's always room for a little bit more, right? So just to give you guys an idea of this progression over the course of basically, it's been 16 years since I ran that first marathon in 2005 at the age of 25. So that first marathon was in 4 hours, 59 minutes about. I ran another marathon 2 years later, that one in 4 hours and 49 minutes. So I was ecstatic to shave off even 10 minutes. But at the same time, it was really just a terrible experience for me. I didn't train well, I didn't know what I was doing, and I was over it. So I wouldn't run another marathon for another 10 years. And like I said, a lot of life happened in between there, a lot of running. But more than that was that I became a mom and had 3 kids and was raising babies and all of that. And after I had that 3rd baby, I decided it was time to give it a go. Again, my husband and I decided to add a bucket list item of running a marathon together. And so that's what we did. So in 2017 was my 3rd marathon, and I ran a 3:48:50. So in that marathon, I cut off an entire hour from the marathon that I did 10 years prior. And so a lot about what I'm going to talk about today was a lot of what I incorporated in that training cycle, and even more so in the years following that marathon, because at that point I felt like I could maybe, just maybe, qualify for Boston. And that's when I started to set my sights on that. So the next marathon that I ran after that, I cut off about 4.5 minutes. That was a 3:43 and change. Still didn't qualify for Boston. So I ran a marathon 9 weeks later, and that's when I qualified for Boston. And 2 weeks ago, shaved off 2 more minutes. So let's get into my 5 strategies of what I feel like I was able to do to be able to shave off all that time in my running. And not only all of these things were they improving my marathon time, but they were improving the times in all of my other races as well. All right, so number 1. I started running more days per week. So way back when I was running those nearly 5-hour marathons, I was only running 3 days per week. So I would do something like 2 shorter runs somewhere during the week and a long run at the course of the week. And I basically told myself, if I'm doing the long run, then that's all that matters. So 3 days a week, I pretty much had this mindset of I'll just do the bare minimum. I just want to check the marathon off my list, which didn't bode well for me. So then as I trained again in 2017, when I ran Twin Cities and ran that 3:48 time, made a huge improvement by starting to run about 5 days a week, sometimes 4, sometimes 5, in that 4 to 5 day a week range. And then once I started getting into the Boston qualifier range, that's when I started running 6 days a week. And anytime I'm marathon training now, I am running 6 days a week. Even just staying consistent through the course of the year. I'm running at least 5 days a week, sometimes 6, but always 6 in marathon training. Number 2, which goes along right with that, is of course, if I'm running more days a week, I'm also running more miles. So honestly, that was so long ago, guys. I don't even know how many miles I was running exactly in my 20s for those slower marathons that I did. But in 3 days a week, it couldn't have been a ton. And I also know that I was really not too focused on those 2 shorter runs during the week. So my guess is I don't think I ever ran anything more than 6 miles during the week. And then obviously I would for my long run. And that was prescribed. I ran with a group. So whatever they were doing on the group runs, I was pretty consistent about those as far as I remember. But I do remember having to walk in them a lot, probably because I was going too fast. My guess is something around 25 miles a week back then. Then when I ran that 3:48 time for Twin Cities, I was closer to about the 40-mile-a-week range, so nothing crazy. I didn't, have to add on tons and tons of mileage to take off that hour off my time. So right in that 40-mile-a-week range. And then when I ran my last marathon before I qualified for Boston, I talked to someone and he just said to me, after the race, he said, I really think getting to 60 miles a week is the sweet spot. And I was hovering more around about 50 at the time. So I got it pretty close to 60. For me and just my lifestyle, getting to 60 miles a week is pretty tough. But I did do this in the last training cycle. That was something super important to me. So I do agree with him. Getting to around at least 60 miles is a pretty good sweet spot for a lot of people in reaching their potential. Certainly if you can, your body can handle doing something more like 70 miles a week, 75 miles per week, that'll probably do even more for you. Okay, number 3 is huge. I learned to slow down. And if you guys have not watched my video about why easy runs are so important and how you can make sure that you're running easy enough, please check that out. I'll link it up here. It's so important. It's something that took me so long to wrap my head around, and I finally ingrained it in my brain, and it seriously mattered. It really mattered for being able to run more days in the week and run more miles, because basically if you're not running slow on most of your mileage during the week, about 75 to 80%, then your body just can't handle all of those extra miles. If you're running hard all the time, which was definitely what I was doing in my 20s when I ran those slower marathons, I would try to run as fast as I could pretty much all the time. I didn't understand easy pace. I didn't understand that it could help you. The whole point of training for a marathon is to build your aerobic engine and your aerobic capacity. I wasn't doing any of that. And so making sure that you're doing a lot of slow running is one of the best things that you can do. Honestly, if you can get in the days a week and the mileage and only do slow running, and I'm not saying don't do any speed work, at least if you're a more experienced advanced runner, but you can improve a ton simply by adding in more miles and doing them all slow miles, basically, because that's what the marathon is like 97% aerobic. And so you need to be building your aerobic engine, and that's how you do it. So if I'm doing any speed work at all, it's basically only 1 day a week or a little bit inside of my marathon, and it's extremely focused and specific. Otherwise, easy running is where it's at. Number 4, so something that I would seriously never have done in the past was run back-to-back days. I remember my husband and I having conversations about this. Oh, you cannot run back-to-back days. It's too hard. And that's because we really were like going out for our runs as hard as we could every single time. It was not helping us in any way. And we were not able to get those miles in because we would never run back-to-back days. So one of the best things that I recommend doing that I worked for me is building up that cumulative fatigue, and that will really help you in the end of your marathon, which is when the going gets seriously tough. So pretty much everything I'm talking about here is, how to get through kind of those last 6 to 8 miles of a marathon. When it gets really hard and your body's breaking down, your body needs to know how to push through that. So what I'm saying with cumulative fatigue is basically you've got your long run. You should definitely be running the day before your long run. because yes, it's going to make your long run harder, but then if you can get through it, then that's gonna just help you that much more when you actually get to your race. You should also be running the day after as well. So at that point, you've got 3 days in a row with your long run sandwich in between. That's a lot of miles covered over the course of 3 days. Now, going back to what I said though, super, super important that you're focusing on easy miles so that your body can hold up through this and so that you don't get hurt. Number 5, so this is the last one, and this is very different than the other ones, but I started really paying attention to my nutrition and what I was eating. So way back in my 20s, I had this mindset of I'm running a marathon, I'm running all these miles, I can eat whatever I want. And that is what I did. And not that I gained a significant amount of weight or anything like that, but as far as I remember, I probably put on like 5 pounds or something. So I remember being like, why aren't I losing weight? I should be losing weight. And you shouldn't necessarily be losing weight. I don't want to put that thought out there either. But a lot of people do go into marathon training. I've said it, I've heard other people say it, I'm running all these miles, I can eat whatever I want, when that's not the case. You know, if you're eating more calories than you're burning, and I'm not a dietitian, but you know, essentially if you're taking in more than you're burning, then you're gonna end up gaining weight. So it's not, and just so you guys are clear, I'm not like someone who is super, super specific about certain food groups. I pretty much will eat most anything, but I know what is good for my body. I know what's fueling my body, and I know what's not. So if I'm putting something in my mouth to eat, such as candy, you know, I'm very aware that this is not doing my training any favors. However, I'm not super restrictive either, and there are times, you know, when I'm gonna have candy or a piece of cake or whatever and not stress about it either. One thing that I know that I've done that's hugely different is limited my alcohol intake a lot. So not that I was drinking a lot when in my 20s, but I certainly had a much more carefree life, we could say. And I've just don't drink very much at all anymore. And I think something like alcohol, especially when you're having it the night before a big run or something like that, it can really affect your training. So just considering your nutrition, I did a Whole30 before that 2017 marathon, and I don't recommend at all doing a Whole30 in marathon training. If that's something that you're interested in doing it, you know, not recommending that here either. It's just something you can look into, but I do think doing the Whole30 taught me a lot about what makes my body feel good and what doesn't, and that really helped along the way, incorporating a lot of those healthy foods, focusing on those in the middle of my marathon training as well. So guys, that's pretty much it. Not that there aren't other things, but those are really the 5 main things that I've done to cut almost an hour and a half off my marathon time. And so if any of these you listened to and thought, well, I'm not doing those, then I would highly recommend trying to incorporate more of that into your training to start getting that marathon time that you have the potential to achieve. If you guys got value out of this video, I would so appreciate if you press the like below, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.